His name is Reverend Daniel Gregoire, and he is a minister of the Unitarian Universalist Society of Grafton and Upton, where he served since 2016. He is a graduate of Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York and has served congregations in New York, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. Reverend Daniel is originally from Brooklyn, New York, and is of Haitian descent, and now lives in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. And
actually my second time visiting. The first time no one was in the building. It was just April and I was taking pictures. I was like a kid in a candy store. I love architecture and I love spaces that have been lived in, and I love the lived in quality of this space, and that's because of you. That's because of the joy and the warmth that you bring to this space. So I'm just soaking it all in. If you want to know more about me, my bio I think is in the order of service, and I'll say a little bit more in the sermon, but I'm just really glad to be here and glad that I'm friends with Reverend Kate, and she offered this opportunity to me, so thank you. Join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. After the spoken prayer and time of silence, we will sing together Spirit of Life, hymn number 123, which is printed in the order of service in English and in Spanish. Let us pray. Spirit of life and of love, moving through this atmosphere, moving through this room, we give you thanks for the coming into the world of springtime, of life, of sunshine, of warm and gentle breezes. We give you thanks for the people who companion us on this journey that we call life, and the ways that they speak to us and listen to us and sing with us and hold our hand when we need that, providing warmth and hugs and encouragement. We give thanks for those things. We also give thanks for those who are moving out of our lives, their presence not with us in body but always with us in spirit. We give thanks for the times that we share together, for the memories that we have created together, and for the stories that live on and always have a life after death. Again, we give thanks for this community and the ways that it supports us, providing us with encouragement and hope and a sense of direction and purpose. And we give thanks for the communities of churches and houses of worship all around, beacons of hope, beacons of welcome and possibility that we are a part of. We give thanks for the leadership of this congregation, expressed in volunteerism, expressed in service, expressed in potlucks, expressed in music and knowing glances. We give thanks for the leadership of Reverend Kate and her well-earned sabbatical and her well-earned birthday, and celebrate with her in our hearts and minds. We pray that this world may come closer to peace, come closer to fulfillment, come closer to becoming what it is to become. For these things, and for so much more, we give silence, we give thanks, we lift up our hearts. And perhaps together we might say, Amen, blessed be, and thank you. This morning comes from the book of Isaiah in the Hebrew Bible, and it's titled, Like a Watered Garden. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of fingers, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, Then your light will rise in the darkness, and your gloom will be like noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places and make your bones strong. And you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt, and you shall raise foundations up of many generations. You shall be called repairers of the breach and restorers of streets to live in. Here ends our reading. Thank you. It's really good to be back in Provincetown, and I am really just delighted, as I mentioned earlier, to be in this beautiful landscape, to be in this sanctuary, delighted by the hospitality of Kat and Chris over in Truro and the lovely house that I'm staying in. And I'm also very grateful to Reverend Kate. You may not know this, but we are part of a minister's study group, so I actually see her at least twice a year, every year, out on the Cape, out in Barnstable at a retreat center a retreat center that's called Craigsville. And every year she brings beautiful, I guess, found objects to decorate our altar table. So like shrubs and berries and, seashells and that sort of thing. Just really bringing the Cape experience to us at that retreat and study session. And to be able to experience that for myself by walking out on the beach and like, oh, she got that from here. It's a pretty wonderful kind of experience. This truly is a magical landscape, and I can see the blessing very much in living here. And this is quite a contrast to my landscape, which is about 75 miles west of here, the beautiful hill country of Worcester County, where it's hard to see sunsets or sunrises because we're in valleys and things like that, and there's lots of trees and no ocean. I think it's beautiful that we occupy these spaces, that there is a Unitarian Universalist congregation in so many of the towns here in New England, each one serving as a beacon, or as I like to think of it, as a jewel on a network of jewels, like a jeweled web. Each congregation is a node of possibility, each congregation kind of flashing, welcome, 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 welcome. Each congregation, whether it's in the beautiful hill country of Grafton or out here on the coast, is a sanctuary for all those who might call themselves lovers of beauty, free thinkers, heretics, atheists, Christians, agnostics, pagans, and naturalists. Each of our meeting houses are a place of welcome for those who draw their inspiration from Buddhism or Hinduism, for Jews and Muslims and interfaith families. This is the kind of thing that makes my heart sing, to know that we've created, wherever we gather, these oases of acceptance. And I see that in this room. Oases for people who are guided by the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism that essentially call us to live lives of love and service and hope for a brighter tomorrow. Again, our congregations are outposts. They're beacons of hope. And they serve as a place for us to maybe drop anchor in rough seas, especially the rough seas of contemporary society. Now, it may be the case that I like church too much. Very few people spend their free time actually visiting churches and taking pictures of them and just hanging out in them. And that is what I do. That's how I first came here, as I mentioned. But again, that call, that pull that I feel to houses of worship is grounded in something more than just aesthetics or cultural production, or even escape. It's something far deeper than that. Our houses of worship, whether they be churches, synagogues, masjids, ashrams, or other sacred places, they are important because they are places where people connect, and through those connections, we encounter the divine. We encounter the divine power in life. So it is true that wherever two or three are gathered up to lift up the shared experience of our humanity, to consider our place in the cosmos, with its trials and triumphs, with its tests and its tribulations, there too is the human spirit. There too is the holy presence. There too is what some call God. There is a power, again, in our coming together in the ways that we do. And I want us to take that power very seriously. And not just in coming together in places like churches, right? When I was in seminary, I can recall that one of my classmates, his name is Michael Roberson, and Michael Roberson was trying to bridge the gap between religious space and dance space. And he came from what's known as the ballroom community in New York. Now, ballroom is not classical waltzing. I had to discover this. Ballroom actually is a contemporary dance form known as voguing. If you ever saw Madonna's video, it comes from a place. And this was a religious space in the gay nightclubs in New York City. There are so many sacred spaces. So many sacred spaces. And if this were not the case, then there would not be so many people hell-bent on disrupting worship, on disrupting gathering places, on making people afraid to come together in places like mosques and churches and synagogues and houses of worship and other large gatherings. There is a power in our coming together, no matter where it is that we come together to experience the holy. And if this were not the case, there would not be so many forces trying to drive us apart. So we must continue to show up. And not showing up just for ourselves. We must continue to show up for each other in whatever ways that we can. And we must show up to do work. Right? And the work that we're doing is a part of our evolutionary process, and it's a multi-generational process as well. The late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, in his iconic I Have a Dream speech, told before throngs of people gathered before the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., he said these words, echoing an ancient Hebrew prophet. He said that I can see the promised land, but I might not get there with you. I can see this promised land, but I might not get there with you. And it is true that Dr. King did not get to see the so-called promised land, this promised land of racial and economic justice and equality, but neither did anybody else. And it may be the case that no one in this room who is alive today will get to see that either, that promised land. But we must remember that our work is a multi-generational project, and that it was started long before we came onto the scene. And while there is work for us to do now, the work is not ours to do alone. But we must do our part, whatever that part is, and we must do it earnestly. Now, before coming today, I knew, I love architecture, so I'm going to talk about buildings and ruins and all of that stuff. I knew that I was going to talk about those things. And I think in part because my life has been driven by at least two fascinations. The first fascination is the thing that made it possible for me to move from New York City to the countryside outside of Worcester and survive, and that is my love of history. Right? Where I live now is a place that understands its its sense of history. It understands itself as a place where things happen slowly. Folks are still fighting out disputes from centuries ago between this family and that family, but that's maybe a sermon for another time. Now, what's interesting is that fascination with things that are old, that are historic, that have the weight of time behind them, is that fascination is also related to my spiritual challenge. And that challenge is, how does someone who loves so much what has passed stay present and rooted in the present? Now, I have a long way to go when it comes to being present. I'm usually stuck in the past or sometimes stuck in the future. But I find that things like mindfulness meditation, that does help. Now, the other thing that is really compelling to me is our Unitarian Universalist identity. I'm fascinated by that and rooted in that, and I'll say more on that in a second. In coming here today, I also knew that I was going to read from the book of Isaiah, because I love any opportunity I can get to preach from the ancient Hebrew scriptures. Because those words, though recorded centuries ago, have a timeless quality to them, a relevance that seems true even today. They speak to human needs. And despite the intervening centuries, those needs have remained unchanged. I think it's important for us as Unitarian Universalists to keep an open line of communication to our roots in Jewish and Christian traditions. And that's not to make an idol of the past, which I can sometimes do, but it's simply to say that we did not appear out of nowhere in 1961 and somehow by some strange magic come to occupy these ancient meeting houses that look an awful lot like churches. We must remember that ours is a religion that is part of an evolutionary process too, that we are growing and expanding as our faith grows and expands. And Unitarian Universalism does that exceptionally well, exceptionally well. So I want us to hold all of these things in mind. In the reading, we hear hints of desolation and consolation. We hear that there are ruins and that we are surrounded by these ruins. We're in the midst of them. We hear of the restoration of streets, and that implies very rightfully that the streets are now broken. We hear that there are breaches that need to be repaired and that we might be the repairers of those breaches. But what are these ruins? The ruins that we are in the midst of right now, this place looks like it's in pretty good shape. As I look out into the world, as I look out globally, I can't help but see ruins. Ruins in our de-industrialized cities and towns. I see ruins in my walks in the woods, ancient foundations and stone walls that tell the stories of a life and a lifestyle that no longer exists. I see ruins in the tears and the rips of the fabric of our society, a society where acts of violence, gross acts of violence, are becoming more and more commonplace. Perhaps you see those ruins too. Ruins in how middle-class families are not able to provide the incomes that were available to them just a generation or two ago. And in these present times of chaos and dislocation, we are called to remain present. As hard as it is to do, the tendency is always to want to escape, to be someplace else. For me, it's to escape to the past. For you, it might be to escape to the future, just anywhere that is not here, that is not right now. But what if the ruins that currently surround us, what if they are a necessary part of a cycle of creation and destruction and regeneration? If we were able to see the ruins differently, would that help us to be more present? think it might. I think it might. If we could reimagine the ruins that we are in the midst of, and perhaps see ourselves instead at a construction site. What if in your watching of the evening news, you could say, you know what, this isn't chaos, this is construction. We are building, perhaps building a new way. There's an old French story about a traveler who journeys to what appears to be a construction site, and there are three men at work doing the same task. He's curious, the traveler, to see what it is that they are doing. So he approaches the first man, who appears to be cutting and shaping stones. And the traveler asks that man, "What is it that you're doing, sir?" And the man, hard at work, turns to the traveler and he says, "Well, I'm cutting and shaping these stones. It is hard work. It is breaking my back. I'm sweating under the hot sun all day." And then he ends it. And somehow, undeterred, the traveler goes on to a second person and asks the same question. "Excuse me, sir, what is it that you are doing?" And that person, occupied again in cutting and shaping stones, turns to the traveler and he says, "I'm cutting and shaping stones. It is hard work, and the sun is beating down on me. But this hard work is providing an income for my family, and it is helping me to keep busy." And he stops there. And the traveler, maybe a bit more encouraged, goes to the third and final person who is cutting and shaping stones. And he asks the stone cutter, "What is it that you are doing?" And the stone cutter looks up to him and says, "I am building a cathedral. I am building a cathedral." Each of these people employed in the same exact work, but bringing with them each a different perspective, a different sense of purpose, a different direction. And that is what I invite us to imagine ourselves. Imagine ourselves at that construction site. Which worker would we be? Which worker would we be? But know this, all of us are workers. As unglamorous as that sounds, and I'm a person who likes to be glamorous, so I have a hard time with this idea that we are all workers, but that is what we are. None of us the master builders. The writer Kent Unterner, in his work titled "Prophets of a Future Not Our Own," says this: "This is what we are about. We lay foundations that will need further development. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something, and to do it very well. It may be incompatible, incomplete. It is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and to do the rest. We may never see the end result," he writes, "but that is the difference. That is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future not our own." We are prophets of a future not our own. And it is important for us to remember that, especially now, when it seems that our efforts at creating a more just and nobler world are not producing the kind of results that we would wish for. And certainly not at the pace that we had imagined before now. It seems like we are fighting battles that have been long fought and won already. That the hatreds and the prejudices and the ignorances that we hope would pass with succeeding generations are finding roots and flourishing among younger generations. Sometimes it seems that the patterns, destructive patterns, even in our own family systems, in our own relationships with our parents or with our children or within ourselves, that despite our best efforts seem to be repeating themselves. And this is to say nothing about the current state of political discourse in our country. When we see this, it is natural for us to despair, to wonder about a future for ourselves, the future for those that we love, for our children, for succeeding generations. But in the midst of this chaos, in the midst of this ruins, this is what we are called to do. To remember the words of the ancient prophet who says that your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt, that you shall raise up foundations of many generations, that you shall be called repairers of the breach and restorers of streets to live in. But perhaps it won't happen all at once. Our consolation and our motivation, I hope, is in the knowledge that we are doing the work that we are called to do, but it is not ours to do the work alone. That we are part of a covenant, that we are part of a contract that spans generations. Each generation tasked with doing better. Each person doing their part to build the new Colossus, the new great thing, and that is what we are doing. We may not get to see the fruits of our labor, this is true, but that should not stop us all the same from doing what it is that we can do. We are becoming something new, and I believe that the crisis of our age, and there are many crises, are bringing people together in ways that have not been possible before now. That difficulties makes for strange bedfellows and also for lasting friendships. And the practice of Unitarian Universalism reminds us to lift up that seventh principle, that respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, and to remember that we are a part of that web of existence. We are not the whole entire thing. That the solutions may not be ours to find, that the ultimate design may not be something that we can fully know. Because from our vantage point, we can only see in part, we can only know in part. We are workers, not master builders. But we can intuitively do our part, no matter how small, no matter where we find ourselves, cutting stones, or placing brick upon brick, or laying down planks, framing doorways. We've come to this place for a reason, and it is indeed hard and sweaty and back-breaking work, and sometimes the scaffolding fails. Sometimes the concrete never sets, and it seems like there is no end in sight. And some might say that in moments like those, we should just give it all up, that whatever it is we're doing can't be done, that these ruins are just going to stay ruins. But I would say that we are at a construction site, and that as hard as it is to see right now, all of us are at work building the great cathedral. Friends, let us not turn despair into an idol. Let's not be satisfied with the idea that we can just throw our hands up and say that there is nothing that can be done. Let us turn away from the false gods of fear and remember that the obstacles and impediments before us are indeed momentary, even though they may not seem that way. And let us power down the engines of distraction, these things, engines of distraction. Let us remember that our resolve is to be eternal, Let us resolve to be eternal. And may our joy be everlasting, because though we are prophets of a future that we cannot see, we can still do our small part, whatever that part is. We can do that work with a joyful song in our hearts while we are doing it. Let us remain hopeful and present and committed to do the work. Blessed be, and amen.